Hey there, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. So yesterday, the FCC reinstated net neutrality regulations over broadband operators that now classifies them as Title II carriers under the 1996 Telecommunications Act. This is something where they were in place for 2 years and they were removed and now they're back again. So today I just want to look at one of the commissioners, Brendan Carr's comments, who voted against this. Just some comments prior to the rules being put in place as to why I don't think this is a good idea. I would agree with him in all aspects of this. Be right back. Thanks for joining me. Rick Uzzi here with Z-Quorum. So yes, net neutrality is back in place for now. There's a good possibility that the Supreme Court will reverse this based on other cases that are taking into account something called a major questions doctrine. Because in general, with that, just very briefly, that just means that the court is moving more in the direction where an agency will have less power to implement things if it's a major question, because the way our government works is really laws are meant to be made by the legislatures, not by the executive branch or the agencies that implement the laws. So they implement the laws, but they're not supposed to make the laws. And then the courts decide are laws constitutional, and that's kind of how our government works. And what's been happening over the years is agencies have been making more and more rules and interpreting laws, and sometimes making regulations, very heavy-handed regulations that were not originally intended by the I shouldn't say legislations, regulations that were not intended by the original legislation. So that's kind of what's going on here. And because of this major questions doctrine that the Supreme Court has been kind of moving away from, they would likely prefer that Congress make any net neutrality rules, especially when you look at the Telecommunications Act, because the Telecommunications Act, first of all, 1996 was the last revision of that. And this was back when there was dial-up internet. And it did not classify internet at that time as it classified it in a separate category. And the FCC is now trying to put it into the same category as telephone companies. So I think there's a lot of reasons that won't fly. But even so, Brendan Carr laid out some things that I think make sense, because here's the issue is, here's why so many people are so angry when you say there's not net neutrality. They get angry when it's not there or if you're going to take it away. So, it was passed in 2015 under the Obama administration. The Trump administration pulled those regulations away in 2017, and you would have thought the world was going to end with broadband because, again, people just don't understand. They listen to what they're told. They don't understand the facts. And because of all the hyperbole, you would have thought the world was going to end. So we're going to look at some real facts today and what net neutrality is. And you can understand that because if you just ask somebody, hey, do you think there should be net neutrality? Well, what does that mean? Well, all internet traffic should be treated the same. You should be able to go anywhere on the internet that's legal. You should be able to go and get there and not be stopped from going there, those kinds of things. And you ask people, that's like, yeah, absolutely. So when you say you're going to take away net neutrality, then people say, well, that's bad, but it's not. Net neutrality and net neutrality regulations are two different things. We've had a net neutral network or internet since the beginning. It was net neutral prior to the rules in 2015. It was net neutral during the rules when they were in place. It's been net neutral from 2015 till yesterday. And now that the rules are in place, again, it's still net neutral. So net neutrality has never changed in all that time. All that's happened is new rules and regulations have been put in place. And generally, if you have rules and regulations that aren't accomplishing anything and aren't needed, it's bad because it costs money and it reduces investment. It just makes it harder to do business. And what we're really all about right now is trying to make it easier for broadband operators to deploy broadband, to keep prices low. You don't want to put anything on them that's going to be, a burdensome regulation that's going to increase their costs. So it doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't to Brendan Carr either. So I was going to look at what he spoke about. This was prior to the rules being put in place. In this case, it was just April 19th. But you see here, new data confirm what Americans already know. The internet is not broken, and President Biden's plan for government control won't fix it. When the FCC ended the Obama administration failed 2-year experiment with these heavy-handed regulations back in 2017, Title II advocates guaranteed that doing so would literally break the internet. And if it is true, if you look back at some of the things people were saying, it did sound like it was going to be the end of the internet as we know it. They claimed that broadband prices would spike, that you would be charged for each website you visited, that the internet itself would slow down. None of this was true. The reality, broadband speeds increased, prices decreased, competition intensified, and years of record-breaking infrastructure bills brought millions across the digital divide. Here's the latest data. And of course, there's different factors that would be influencing this, and I'll mention that maybe here and there. But it is true that, again, the rules didn't do anything, and re-implementing the rules isn't going to do anything to help any issues that we have that they're trying to address. So here you see internet speeds are up. Median fixed download speeds in the U.S. have increased 430% since 2017. And of course, the factor there is just technology's improved. But, so you can't say, well, it's because the regulations were released or eliminated because that's why this happened. But, having them there certainly would not have made a difference. Median mobile download speeds increased by 647% since 2017. The United States has leapfrogged other countries since 2017. A lot of times people were saying we were way behind on internet compared to other countries. But in general, it's always been difficult in this country because of the fact that we're a big country. You've got small countries maybe that have got denser population in the majority of their country, and we are a country that has areas of dense population. Obviously, we've got lots of people living in very concentrated areas, and there's lots of people living in very, very rural, spread out areas. Those are the areas that are difficult, and we've come a long way and are continuing to come a long way to address that. Prices are down. Prices for internet services have dropped about 9%. Again, not necessarily related to the rules being lifted. It could have helped, certainly, as you have regulations on. Again, that can cause companies to maybe have to raise prices as they have more regulatory burdens. On the mobile broadband side, they're down by roughly 18%. And for the most popular broadband speed tiers, retail prices are down 54%. And for the fastest broadband tiers, prices are down 55% over the past 8 years. And again, other factors involved there as you have faster speeds coming out. Operators want to maintain people at a certain plan, so then they give them more speed for the same price, and then they have other plans that they put in there. For example, maybe they roll out a gig plan, and then the people that were on the 300 meg plan are paying less if they want that. But what they do generally is they'll upgrade everybody to the higher level plan so that they don't lose revenue, and then they put a lower level plan in there that people can get. Competition is intensified. The percentage of Americans with access to 2 or more high-speed fixed ISPs increased by about 30%. And the second point here is why. New players and forms of competition, such as low Earth orbit satellite, people like Starlink, and others that are coming. And then 5G offerings. Obviously, you got T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T, as well as other independent wireless providers. But really, the big factor there has been the large mobile carriers that have rolled out 5G offerings across the country through their cellular networks, and that really has made a difference. So lots of people now, if they can get a wired, even if they're in a fairly rural area and they can get a wired service from maybe fiber service or cable modem service, they can also a lot of times get 5G service or fixed wireless service from somebody. So there is more competition now. Broadband builds and investment accelerated. A more than 50% increase over 2016 numbers. In 2022, the broadband industry invested a record $102.4 billion in U.S. communications infrastructure, which represents a 21-year high for investment and a 19% year-over-year increase. And again, factors that are involved in this would be federal funding. You've had CAF2 and RDOF and ARPA funding the last few years. You've had bills going on because of that, so that's making a difference. And of course, we've got BEAD money that's not even been rolled out yet as far as last mile infrastructure, and that is coming. So we're going to continue to see that, and implementing net neutrality regulations, it would have an impact, especially on smaller operators where those kinds of burdensome regulations can be difficult and make them maybe less likely to invest when they, than like maybe a big operator. But I think the big thing is that the regulations as they are, they don't really address these things. This is not what net neutrality is supposed to be addressing, and what it's supposed to be addressing is not an issue. That's really the main thing, is the internet has been and still is net neutral with or without the regulations. So these kinds of things, the things that they said were going to be a problem, have not been a problem because net neutrality doesn't address these things. And then in his second piece here, here's where he talks about the reasons that the Biden administration was giving for net neutrality regulations, which again are not related to net neutrality. So it's got nothing to do whether you're going to be able to get on the internet and go where you want to go. And he kind of debunks some of these things. So he says, again, as Carr fact checks President Biden's myth-filled plan for expanding government control of the internet. And you probably know, but Carr is a Republican, and this is a Democrat administration. He's one of the 3 Republicans on the FCC. Is it 3 or 2? Is it 5? I can't recall. But in any event, he's one of the Republicans, and the Democrats have the majority there. So it's got the free and open internet has flourished precisely because it's been unfettered by these types of command and control regulations and bureaucratic management. Indeed, while the FCC first applied Title II to high-speed internet back in 2015, at President Obama's direction, we quickly ended that failed experiment in 2017. So he's calling it a failed experiment. Really what it amounts to is, again, and this is what you have, if you don't have legislation in place, then you have the Obama administration comes in and they implement the rules. The Trump administration comes in, they take away the rules. The Biden administration comes in and they re-implement the rules. And who knows, if a future Trump administration comes in, they're going to take away the rules. But the common denominator there is nothing's changed, right? Whether the rules were in place or not in place, nothing's changed because the internet is net neutral and has stayed net neutral regardless. It says this time around, the FCC offers up a melange of reasons why Title II regulation is necessary that are nothing more than pretext. None of them withstand even casual scrutiny. The only reason for applying Title II is to expand government control of the internet. It's got myth here. Title II is necessary to ensure a free and open internet. This myth debunks itself. Americans' own experiences have demonstrated that Title II is a solution that doesn't work to a problem that doesn't exist. And I always said that net neutrality were regulations in search of a problem, that the problem wasn't there. And I have nothing against regulations when there's a problem, when it needs to be addressed that way. But in general, I don't want to see regulations and rules in place if there's no reason for them. And again, there's certain things that you want consistency on if needed, and then that would be, if Congress sees the need, then they pass legislation, and then again, the executive department, the FCC, the FTC, and other kinds of agencies would then implement those rules. The FCC's latest set of claims fare no better than those trotted out back then. That's why it invents so many new justifications. They're throwing everything they can think of against the wall, but none of it sticks. ISPs are not the ones limiting free and open internet. Big tech companies are doing that, yet the FCC's Title II approach only enhances big tech's power. That's a really good point, because we've had, people talk about not being able to get information. ISPs will be censoring information. You won't be able to go to websites and whatnot. And ISPs, they don't want to do that. They want their customers to go anywhere on the internet that they can go. They want their customers to have the best experience they can. They want them to get there fast, because that's their business, right? They want them to be able to get there fast. Now, obviously, they've got to consider costs and, what it's going to cost to provide the best speeds, those kinds of things. But they want their customers to go anywhere they can that's legal, that they're required not to be able to let them go to, for example, child pornography or those kinds of things. But everywhere else, they want their customers to be able to go there, to be able to go there. But what did we see with big tech? Those are the folks that really have the power over what you are seeing and hearing. When you go to a search engine and type something in, they are the people that can determine what results you see. On Facebook, Twitter, whatever, certainly TikTok, which is not even owned here in the United States, owned by the Chinese Communist Party, they are going to determine what shows up in your feed, what kinds of messages you're seeing. And we saw certainly back during the pandemic that as some of these tech companies were trying to censor things, they were claiming things were misinformation and disinformation. And we now know, a few years out, after that a lot of what they were saying was misinformation, disinformation turned out to be the truth. And the actual misinformation was what they were highlighting and putting in front of you, that was actually wrong, related to COVID, let's say, and some other things. So, there's really a lot of power here that needs to be looked at, and there's been different legislation that's trying to, or different efforts to maybe try to rein in some of that. The best thing would be, I guess, to just make them completely neutral, but they also need to be responsible for the kind of information that's out there. So it's kind of a tough thing it's kind of a challenge to do that. Myth. Title II is necessary because there has been no federal oversight over this vital service since the FCC's 2017 decision. And it says, fact, the FTC has jurisdiction over ISPs today and enforces federal consumer protection laws against them. Moreover, the FCC itself has asserted broad oversight and regulatory authority over ISPs without Title II, including the Digital Equity Order it adopted just last year, an FCC decision that expressly regulates throttling and other issues raised by the FCC in the Title II order. There are already multiple cops on the beat. And that is true. So when the rules were lifted in 2017, specifically they said the FCC and the FTC were going to work together. The FCC would be, if the FCC was made aware of any issues, then the FTC would get involved, and it had the regulatory authority to be able to take action on broadband providers if needed, depending on what it was. Title II is necessary for consumer privacy. The FTC already regulates ISPs and their privacy practices. Indeed, at this very moment, broadband consumers benefit from the same set of federal privacy rules that protect consumers across the economy. And there's more facts there if you want to check that out. By the way, I linked to both these documents in the description of the video. Another myth, Title II is necessary for national security. The FCC has identified no gap in national security that Title II is necessary to fill. Rather, the FCC record makes it clear that Congress has already empowered agencies with national security expertise, including DHS, DOJ, Department of Justice, Commerce, and Treasury, to address these issues in the communications sector. So again, there's different agencies that already have a purview here that would be weighing in here. It doesn't need to be the FCC under Title II regulations. We don't need to be adding anything. Another myth, Title II is necessary so the FCC can use Section 2014 to revoke the authorizations of certain entities controlled by the Communist China Party, CCP, Communist China, basically. Fact, the Biden administration already has the authority to prohibit those entities from continuing to operate in the U.S. Indeed, the Commerce Department codified one such set of authorities back in 2021. The government can prevent them from operating today. So again, these, in fact, just recently, yesterday, I think it was, maybe even today, the president signed a ban, in a sense, on TikTok, a company that I mentioned is owned by the Chinese Communist Party. And, that's a significant problem because, again, the information that is being sent to lots of kids, and the information, even more importantly, that's collected by the Communist Party about the people that are using TikTok, this is a real concern. The government, I believe, had blocked it or said it needed to be blocked on all government devices. And now what they've said is basically it's going to be banned. I think they said it would be banned in a year if the Chinese Communist Party does not divest TikTok, or ByteDance is the owner company, which is basically owned by the Chinese Communist Party. If you look at the way they do business there, if it's not divested to an American-owned company, somebody that's not owned by the Chinese Communist Party, then it will be banned. And I thought I heard where the Communist Chinese Party, or ByteDance, came out and said we're not going to do that. So it may be banned in a year. But of course, there's other things like Huawei and ZTE equipment that cannot be used here in the United States, again, because in communist China, you have businesses that basically, they're not free enterprises. They are owned by the party. And you've got information that can flow back to them, possibly through some of this equipment. So these are concerns. But again, this is all being handled today without Title II authority. Myth, Title II is necessary for law enforcement. The federal government already has ample authority to advance its law enforcement goals without Title II. The DOJ and FBI have authority over ISPs through FISA, the Foreign Surveillance Intelligence Act. That's FISA, and that was just recently reauthorized. The Electronic Communications Privacy Act, the Wiretap Act, and many other authorities. For the FCC's part, the agency complied or applied the Communications Assistant for Law Enforcement Act, or also known as CALEA, to broadband providers long ago without Title II regulation. And that is the rule that when digital switches came out in phone systems, CALEA was passed because you couldn't go in and easily do a wiretap anymore. Literally, on the old switches where you would literally have wires and tap and could listen in on somebody. When the digital switches came out, they needed to have a technology that would allow you to do basically an intercept of communications data. And then in 2000 something, I forget when, 2004, I believe maybe, it was applied to broadband operators, where if you are a broadband operator, you have to have the ability to do a live intercept of any information. It could be data, VoIP calls, whatever, if you are presented with a lawful court order to do so. That's CALEA. And by the way, if you don't have CALEA, check us out, because you have to have it if you're a broadband provider. And a lot of broadband operators don't realize that. And if you don't have it and the FBI knocks on your door and says they have to do a live intercept through CALEA, then you could be fined up to $10,000 a day. So make sure that you have that. I'll have our contact info up at the end here, or zquorum.com. Let's put it up right now just to make sure. So you can see right here, you've got our website and our email address and our phone number. So if you don't have CALEA in place, check us out. But that's something that that is already in place. So again, this is not needed as far as net neutrality regulations. It's not needed for law enforcement. We have several things in place there. Myth, Title II is necessary for cybersecurity. Again, Congress and the executive branch have already formulated a comprehensive cybersecurity regime that is solidly grounded in existing law. That effort is led not by the FCC, but by the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security. And this is true. And as we know from BEAD funding, USDA Reconnect now, enhanced EACAM, all of those programs, if you're going to get federal funding, you have to have cybersecurity in place if you're going to use those dollars. And really for all broadband operators, and I talked about this a week or so ago, under CISA, they are now evaluating rules for cybersecurity, not just for broadband operators, but for all companies that would be considered critical infrastructure kinds of providers. And certainly they make a really strong case in their proposed rules that just came out a week or two ago, that communications providers, broadband providers, should be at the very top of that pack that should have cybersecurity in place and be required to have that in place, because all other entities, business entities, rely on the communications sector to be able to do business. So I think cybersecurity is going to be something that's going to have to be put in place for broadband operators in general, not just for those that are accepting federal funds. So that's something to be aware of. And again, therefore, there's no reason to have Title II regulations for net neutrality. Again, net neutrality, not related to cybersecurity, as far as getting that in place. It's already there, and for federal funding, and it will be there for other kinds of reasons for broadband operators. And let me put our number up again in our website, because go to our website and look for cybersecurity, and you'll find that we've got managed cybersecurity solutions for you. Which again, you're going to need if you're going to get broadband funding from USDA Reconnect, BEAD, or EACAM, and future broadband funding for sure. And really, it's not going to be long, might be a year or two before it's going to be required just in general. So check that out. You'll see that we've got several managed solutions that will, be a lot easier for you to implement. So again, that's myth as far as cybersecurity. Then he's got here, Title II is necessary for public safety. The FCC rests this claim on a single event that it turns out has nothing to do with the FCC's Title II net neutrality rules. In 2018, or in that 2018 incident, a fire department purchased a data-limited plan that costs less than an unlimited data plan. When the fire department hit that pre-specified limit, the service experienced a speed reduction as outlined in its plan before the provider made an exception and lifted the reduction. So in other words, they just purchased a plan that had limited data, so it's really nothing to do with net neutrality, and that's allowed under net neutrality rules. There's nothing that says if you were a broadband provider under net neutrality that you cannot have different plans, some of which will be more expensive and include more data, some of which are less expensive and include less data. So again, this is not something that this really addresses. myth, Title II is necessary for outage reports and network resiliency. The FCC already collects outage reports, operational status, and restoration information from broadband service providers. That's one reason. For another, America's broadband networks are more robust and resilient than those in countries with far more heavy-handed or Title II-like regulatory regimes. Again, broadband operators, they're in the business of providing a good broadband service, a good quality service. Not everybody does, but that doesn't mean that net neutrality regulations are going to change that, I guess, because really what changes that is competition. And yeah, we could use more competition in some places. But even if you don't have competition, you've got a reputation. So broadband operators, even if they're a monopoly operator, they may charge too much, but generally they're going to be in the business of wanting to please their customers because they want to make sure that they have a good reputation. They don't want to have bad word of mouth. If there's competition, that's especially true, because if people have a choice to go to one to another, then they will do that. So that is kind of what drives companies to make sure that their networks are good, that they're reducing the number of outages. And, in general, I think, again, it's going to vary depending on where you are. You might be in a small area with a small company that doesn't have the resources to be able to upgrade their network the way that they should. And we're trying to address these things through funding, through programs like ARPA and BEAD, to where we can get good broadband. You're going to have a better experience with fiber. It's going to be more resilient, those kinds of things. So we're doing what we can. But again, net neutrality is not going to help and could hurt because, again, these small providers in these areas or these areas that are more high cost, they're more high cost. So if you're going to lay additional costs on top of a broadband operator in the form of regulations, that doesn't help. So again, this is again not a reason to do this. Title II is good for promoting additional broadband builds. After the FCC imposed Title II rules on internet back in 2015, many broadband providers reduced their investment and halted the expansion of their networks. Indeed, it was the only period of time outside of a recession where broadband investment declined. And after the FCC repealed those rules in 2017, broadband providers set new records for building out internet infrastructure. And that may be correct. I didn't fact check him. I didn't fact check his fact check. Again, there could be other factors here. I would tend to think there wouldn't be that severe an impact. So there may have been things going on during that period that would have impacted that. And then, as I said, certainly since then, as we've had, a focus on getting more broadband deployment out there with federal funding, you're going to see an increase. But again, there's no reason why Title II would be good for promoting additional broadband builds. I don't see it that way. I do see it as the opposite, but I just think maybe maybe what he's explaining here or describing here, it would not have been that severe just from Title II being removed alone. There might have been other factors in play there, but certainly I don't see why adding regulations, there's nothing in there that would promote additional broadband build outs. What's going to promote that is the kind of money that we're putting towards funding. That's what's going to make a difference there. So again, as you look through all of this, you'll see that really you can't argue with the facts. Net neutrality, again, the whole point of net neutrality is to try to make sure that I should say net neutrality rules is to try to make sure that you can go on the internet where you want to go, that you're not unduly slowed down for bad reasons. In other words, you should not be slowed down because by one internet provider because they want to, what's an example that's happened in the past? For example, if you're with a internet provider and you're getting cable TV from them and you also want to get streaming service, they should not be able to slow down your streaming service because you're going with a competitor. And there were some issues kind of like that in the early days. And you know what happened? They were addressed without net neutrality regulations. The FCC addressed those. They didn't need the regulations, and it stopped. So that's the kind of thing that might happen. But it was rare, and when it did happen, it was handled. So again, no reason to be doing this other than the fact that, I hate to say this, but other than the fact that they were removed by the Trump administration and they wanted to put them back in place as kind of we're going to put them back in place. There's no other reason that I can see. The FCC gave a bunch of reasons that didn't make a lot of sense, and that's what Brendan Carr was kind of going through in that list. There's nothing. I think the biggest thing is that we've seen there's been no change with or without net neutrality regulations. And I would say this, that if something does come up, that is the time to look at it. If something comes up then say, okay, well, here's something that is a policy that an internet service provider is doing that is not net neutral. And you can tell them stop that. And if they don't stop that, then you can seek out a way to stop that behavior. And again, you could probably do that with what's in place today with the FCC and the FTC. And if not, then you get Congress involved and they pass laws. But there's no reason to do any of that today. We haven't seen a problem. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. And if you don't agree, if you do agree, if you don't agree, feel free to leave your comments in the comment section. That's fine. I understand, people have differing views, certainly. But I want to make sure that you had the facts and the reasons for net neutrality that they put forward and why they don't really make a lot of sense as far as what people want out of net neutrality. And what people want is a net neutral internet, and that's what we have. And people get a little bit scared when you say that that's going to be taken away, but that's not what they're saying. When people say, we're going to take away net neutrality, they don't mean that. They would say, we're taking away the net neutrality regulations, which aren't doing anything. That's what would be said if a Republican administration comes in again, because they would remove these regulations, I would imagine. And that's what they're going to say is we're taking away net neutrality rules, not net neutrality. You got to remember that if that comes up. I appreciate it. If you found this interesting or informational, if you give me a like on the video, thank you. And subscribe to our channel, click the subscribe button, ring the bell, and you'll be notified when I'm live. See you next time. Bye-bye.